Howdy everybody, good afternoon. Hope you're having a great day, great week. We had some kind of cooler autumn temperatures. Now we're starting to get a little bit warmer, but it's still very autumn-like. And as such, this is our very special Autumn Leaves edition of the Neighborhood Naturalist. I am Mr. Bob, your Neighborhood Naturalist, Bob Langston from the North Carolina Zoo. And pull up a chair, we're going to have a little talk for just a little bit. We're now into October, and so leaves will become very important over the next month or so. Why? Because the trees will be shedding them, they'll fall on the ground. Sometimes we have to rake them up, sometimes we grind them up. In general, it's actually better for some of the insects, butterflies especially, and moths, if you can leave them on the ground, because a lot of times there will be eggs laid on some of those leaves for insects that will have to overwinter. But let's not worry about what you do with them. Let's look at them just for the sake of the leaf. For the most part, all leaves on all trees look the same no matter where they are on the tree. Now, sometimes when they're young, they'll have one shape, and then as they get bigger, they'll change shape and become more mature. But for the most part, if you pluck a leaf off the top of a tree, it's going to look very similar to the one that comes down close to the ground. They don't all lose their color, and they don't all fall off the tree at the same time. Think back to the springtime. Early in the spring, there are two trees right here in the Piedmont, North Carolina, that typically bloom and get their leaves before anything else. And I'll tell you about those in just a second. But let's look first at the one that typically loses its leaves the first. And that would be the Tulip Poplar. And I'm going to hold this up, so hopefully you can see that in the sun right there. Tulip Poplars have a nice palm-shaped leaf, but it only has 4 fingers, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Tulip Poplars, this one has, it's already started falling on the ground, so I happened to find this one. If you ever find these little things, by the way, it's this little green cone looking thing. This is actually a Tulip Poplar cone. This one was a flower that never actually sort of matured very much, and it ultimately just fell off the tree. So, Tulip Poplars. They're the first ones typically around here that start to turn yellow, start to turn brown, and fall off the tree. Now in the springtime, the 2 flowers I mentioned and the 2 trees that leaf out first, one of them has a purple flower, and those are called red buds. And so on a red bud tree, you have this leaf shape. And all of the leaves on the tree, whether they're at the top or the bottom, will have this same shape. This is what's called a spade shape, or sort of, well, you know, think about it if you're playing cards. This is what the spade looks like, ace of spades. There are other trees that have a similar leaf. Catalpa does, and Paulownia does, but this one happens to be a red bud. It's already started getting the brown spots on it because this one has already started getting ready to fall off the tree. It flowers early. It gets its leaves early in the springtime. Therefore, it tends to want to give up its leaves a lot sooner in the fall. The other one that we talk about typically has white flowers that comes out early in the spring. And those, of course, are dogwoods. And so all of your dogwood leaves will look just like this, no matter what time of year it happens to be. Well, in the winter they probably don't have leaves, but anyway, when they do. So they're all going to be shaped like this. This time of the year, many of the dogwoods are seeding out, and they have these brilliant red seeds that sort of offset the changing leaf color as we go. Now, some of the trees have leaves, and they look very similar to other trees, but they are different. This one is one of our maple species, and these guys haven't even really started changing color yet. This one is palm-shaped, and it has really almost 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 points. There are 2 smaller ones there, but you know, a 7-fingered hand would look a little odd unless you happen to have one. In that case, it's beautiful. So, maple leaves like this. Now, there's one that grows right here that looks very similar to a maple. This one very definitively has 5 fingers on it. And this one is a sweet gum. So maple, sweet gum, they look different. By the way, we have different types of maple trees around the area as well. So some will look exactly like this. Some are going to look slightly different. I have to get out my plant book in order to really identify them all the way down. Now, every now and again, you get what's called a compound leaf. And I was talking about hickory nuts a week or two back, but these are the hickory leaves. And in this case, this one has 5 leaflets. This is 1 leaf right here. Occasionally they'll have 7. They'll have 2 smaller ones down here too. But for the most part, hickory have a compound leaf and it looks a bit like this. Oak trees, lots of different kinds of oaks. If you go all the way back, I believe it was earlier in the summer, I was actually talking about different oak trees as far as red oaks versus black oaks. And so red oaks versus white oaks. These are actually a couple of the red oak leaves. This one is a big scarlet oak leaf, and I forget what this one's called. But that one of the ways we can tell them apart are the pointy little lobes on the tip of the leaf. This one fell off of a dead limb in the backyard, so I picked it up and decided I'd show you what that one was all about. Interesting enough, this one actually has some insect eggs on the back. There's some web silk that has these on the back of the leaf, so somebody is already using that as a place to overwinter. This one, not so much, but it does have the little points. I'll see if you can see that there, the little points on the tips of the leaves. Now, white oaks come in different varieties, but their leaf tips are pretty much rounded. And these are 2 different types of white oaks that also can be found here in the yard. Again, with the oak trees, typically, unless it's just a very, very early sprout, at the bottom of the tree, the leaves are going to look like this. At the top of the tree, the leaves are going to look like this. I want to introduce you to a couple of the oddballs. We do have some trees that grow right around in this area, this part of North Carolina, that have different shaped leaves. That means that we're going to go up and I'm going to show you some live plants, 2 in particular, that have different shapes of leaves depending upon where they are on the plant. And so that's kind of what makes them unique. The other thing that makes them unique is, for the most part, these are considered to be edible plants. So come on with me. We're going to walk over here and we're going to take a look at a couple of the trees in the yard that are different in the fact that they have different leaf shapes on different parts of the plant. So come on, let's take a walk, huh? This little tree that you see right here doesn't look that spectacular. This one's about 3 years old, and about 3 years ago I found it as a sprout growing in an old wood pile that I was in the process of moving. Decided I'd dig it up and stick it in a pot. So this one is called a mulberry tree. Again, it does have an edible fruit. The fruits look a lot like blackberries when they get ripe in the summertime. This one's not old enough yet to have bloomed and produced fruit. But what makes it interesting from a sort of plant person leaf perspective is that it has different shaped leaves depending upon where they are on the plant. So we're going to get closer and take a look and see what some of these leaves look like. So stay with me. We're going to get up close. All right, so now we're down here very close on this mulberry. And if you can look at this leaf right here, you'll notice this one has a little thumb. It looks like a mitten with a thumb on it. There's another one right over here that looks the same way. But the rest of the leaves all have this nice spade shape, and it has a toothy edge on the edge. So mulberries, again, sometimes they can actually start out looking a little bit like a grape leaf. Little stubby one right there. Trying to get that out of the shadows. Let's see. Just doesn't want to work with me today. Sometimes they'll start off looking a little bit like a grape leaf. They'll get the little thumb on them, like so, and then the rest of them are spade-shaped. So mulberries, they're a fruit-bearing tree that has leaves that that have multiple shapes on the same plant. And that makes them rather unique in the plant world. Not completely unique, just kind of interesting. Let's look at one that has actually 3 shapes on it. So come with me. Let's take another little walk. Alrighty then. We have this little patch of woods in between my house and the apartments next door. And occasionally in this little thick part, you'll get some interesting things that are growing. Now up here, these are grapes, muscadine grapes. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about this little tree right here. This little tree is one that's kind of interesting as far as edibles go. These days, it's not considered to be much of an edible because it does have a particular chemical in it that can cause cancer, called safrole. This is a sassafras tree. And what's interesting about it is you can have all kinds of different leaf shapes here. You can have this one, which is solid. You can have this one, which looks kind of like a mitten with a thumb and a little finger. And it's got 3 lobes on it. And occasionally on this plant, you'll find one that has 2 lobes. Let's see if I can find one of those. There's one right there that has 2 lobes. It just has a finger and a thumb. Now, sassafras is kind of an interesting plant. Tea that used to be made from the root bark gave us the flavor that was root beer. And if you put vanilla and sassafras root together and carbonate it with some sugar, you would get a beverage known as sarsaparilla. And that's one of those interesting flavors. Down around New Orleans and further into the south, there's it's not really a spice, it's an ingredient for cooking known as filet. You'll hear people talk about filet gumbo and stuff like that. And filet is a sassafras leaf that's been dried out and crushed up, and it's used as a thickening agent in a lot of different types of southern cooking. So sassafras and mulberry, these are both plants I grew up thinking they were edible. The berries on the mulberry and lots of different parts of the sassafras. You could pluck these and chew them and they have an interesting flavor. I do not recommend doing that anymore because the safrole is carcinogenic. But that one is found right here. It grows wild in central North Carolina. Okay, so we've made the full trip around the house. You've seen all of the leaves that are pretty typical, pretty normal for my backyard anyway. Probably yours too if you live anywhere around central Piedmont, North Carolina. Talked a little bit about mulberries as a plant that has different leaf shapes. You can have the spade shape, or you can have one that has a spade with a thumb. With the sassafras, you can have the spade-shaped leaf. You can have a spade with a thumb. You can have a spade with a thumb and a pinky. Those are some kind of cool ways you can identify those particular plants. They are natives. They grow around here all the time. As I mentioned, the mulberry came up in a little wood pile that was right over there that I just dug it up and put it in a pot. I have another one that's sitting over there. Hopefully I can root them, so I have 2 of them. They can cross-pollinate each other. Maybe I can have some cool berries in a year or 2. That would be a plus. Anyway, a little bit about the zoo. It is October, and one of the events that often comes up in October around the zoo is what's known as Boo at the Zoo. It's our little Halloween celebration, and Boo at the Zoo is going to be happening this year. It's going to be modified because we're still dealing with the COVID restrictions. Even though things have loosened up a little bit, they're not completely wide open yet. So if you're interested in Boo at the Zoo, the dates, the times, all the limitations, and the changes in the schedule, those are all posted on the zoo's website at www.nczoo.org. You can also find out about entry policies. You can make your reservations, buy your tickets all online, and take care of all that stuff through our website. And we are looking forward to having you visit with us. These cooler days in the autumn are wonderful times to come and visit the zoo. The animals are active. It's not nearly as hot and sweaty. So please make arrangements to come visit us at the zoo. For the North Carolina Zoo, I'm Bob Langston, Mr. Bob, your neighborhood naturalist. Get outside, enjoy the fall, be safe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for letting me spend a little time with you today. Be good now. Take care.